In the first episode of The Haunting of Hill House, we're introduced to the Crane family, who in 1992 buy the Hill House, which was abandoned, with plans on restoring it and selling it. But the renovations take longer than they thought, and the family is forced to move into the house, where they're there by themselves. Now, the house was taken care of by a couple named the Dudleys, but the Dudleys don't live on the property. They live close by. So Olivia and Hugh Crane, along with their 5 children, are in the house by themselves. And it's a pretty creepy house. And 2 of the youngest children, Nell and Luke, sleep in a room together. And Nell keeps getting nightmares of this woman with a broken neck coming from under her bed and terrorizing her. And Hugh, the dad, is just chalking it up to nightmares, but it's a lot more than that, as we come to find out. This isn't just a one-off, it's a trend. And as I said previously, the family is trying to renovate the house, and one room that they can't get into is this room that's locked with a red door. And Nell and her older sister Shirley desperately want to get in there to see what's in there, and Nell is saying that there's somebody in there or something in there moving, maybe a pony, because she can see it under the crack in the door. But after Mr. Dudley gives them a master key and they still can't get in, they give up. But you, in fact, can see something moving in that room. On top of that, the other child in that room, Luke, is sitting in his tree house, and when his older brother Steven shows up and sees what he's drawing, he gets a little creeped out because the drawings are spooky. And Steven wants to know where he's getting these thoughts to draw this, and he's getting it from his bedroom. But even with all of this, the family still isn't buying that these children are seeing ghosts. Until eventually one night, Steven is awoken by his father, who says that they have to be as quiet as possible and they're going to run. As Steven and his dad hide in Steven's bedroom and you see something moving the doorknob, it's clear that whatever's out there is terrifying Hugh Crane. Finally, it seems like this thing has gone away, so Hugh picks up his son and says, "Close your eyes and do not look. Whatever you do, do not look." And he grabs his child and he runs out of the house. But you see that woman with the broken neck kind of chasing them. Eventually, they reach the outside where Hugh has put all 5 of his children in their car and driven off. And the children want to know where their mother is. And you find out that their mother committed suicide in the house. And this has become a pretty big story with the local news, who thinks that the husband killed the wife. On top of it, they're very suspicious because he's not letting any of the children take the stand to defend him. But Hugh says they didn't know anything because I had them close their eyes when we were leaving the house. Even though his lawyer is imploring him to have the children take the stand and sell the house, Hugh has no plans on that at all. Hugh says, "I'm keeping the house, you're to lock it forever, and the only people allowed in the house are the Dudleys. That's it. And I want to know every single day that that house is empty." But we fast forward to present day, where Steven has become a ghost writer who writes about haunted places and supernatural interactions. And the first place that he wrote about, which really helped his career take off, was the Hill House. And when he wrote about this, it really pissed off some family members, mainly Shirley, because she felt like he was exploiting their traumatic experience. Because the Hill House has become the most haunted house in America, even though when the Cranes moved in there, it wasn't that at all. So the advancement that he got for this book was substantial, and it really helped him out. And now he's so successful that he has people willing to bring him in to their traumatic experiences to see if he'll A, investigate it, and B, write about it. And one woman in particular who brings Steven in wants him to investigate her husband, who passed away in a car accident on a rainy night and was found dead with a broken arm and the car horn going off as he was trying to alert anyone around to the wreckage. This woman claims that the night that her husband died, she went to bed and she started getting hit with water and she could hear car horns. And then all of a sudden she looked up and saw her dead husband hanging from the ceiling. He lets her know that he's willing to stay in the room, and as he walks to the room, he notices a bookshelf that has all of his books on it, and she admits that she and her husband were fans. He says, "To be honest with you, I've never actually seen a ghost. All of these stories are other people's tales, but I'm willing to stay and still investigate for you." But he gets a call from his younger sister, Nell, and he doesn't answer, so Nell calls Shirley. And Shirley doesn't answer because she's running her business, a funeral parlor, where her younger sister, Theodora, lives at. But eventually both Steven and Shirley listen to voice messages, and it's clear that Nell is off. Nell is claiming that she's worried about Luke, who coincidentally has become a drug addict and is currently in a treatment center. So both kids who were in the room with the broken neck woman have grown up to become the black sheep of the family. So after failing to get in touch with her brother or sister, Nell ends up calling Hugh, her dad. She calls her dad very late at night and wakes him up and asks, "Do you remember the woman with the broken neck?" And it's ironic that he's getting this phone call because he was just visited by either his dead wife or the woman with the broken neck. I'm not quite sure. So he says, "Yes, I do." And Nell says, "Well, she's back." Hugh immediately asks where she is, and she says, "I'm in bed." And he says, "Okay, get to Steven's house. I'll meet you there tomorrow." But Nell isn't in bed because Nell is sitting in her car outside of the Hill House. and when she gets off the phone with her father, she goes inside. Nell enters that red room that was locked when she was a child, and when she does, all of her brothers and sisters suddenly wake up at the exact same time, 3:03 a.m. And this wakes up Steven, who's staying in that woman's house. Steven tries to go back to sleep, but when he does, water starts dripping on his face, and he notices that the roof is leaking. He also hears somebody lay on their car horn outside and notices that there's a lack of a stop sign, and thus there's quite a few close calls. So the next morning, he starts telling her all of these things and justifying why she saw what she saw or thought she saw what she saw. And it seems like this happens a lot with Steven, where maybe he sees something but convinces himself it was something else. The woman asks, all right, well then explain why I saw my dead husband from the ceiling. And he says, it's because you wanted to see your husband. Maybe not like that, but you didn't want to go the rest of your life never having seen him again. But before he leaves, Steven does say that he will write about this story. He will follow up with her. And it's partly because he needs something to write about and partly because they are big fans. As he's leaving the woman's house, Steven gets a call from his dad saying that Nell is headed his way. So Steven calls his ex-wife to let her know that Nell might end up showing up at her house. And you could tell there's a very contentious relationship between Steven and his ex-wife. Eventually, Steven arrives at his apartment, and when he enters the door, he catches Luke walking down the steps holding a camera and an iPad. And Luke looks in pretty rough shape. Steven isn't quite sure how Luke found his address, but Luke has broken in, stolen his stuff, and even though he says it's not what it looks like, it's exactly what it looks like, and it forces Steven to have to pay Luke off to give his stuff back and leave. Steven enters his apartment and sees Nell, and he immediately says, did you tell Luke where I lived? And Nell isn't saying anything. He asks her if she brought Luke there, and she's still not saying anything. And then Steven gets a phone call from his dad, and it's pretty muffled, but his dad says Nell is lying. Steven says, well, that's not a surprise. And Hugh says, she was never in Los Angeles. She was at the house, and now she's dead. And when Steven turns around, Nell is right in his face, as her face turns black and she starts screaming at him. So if Steven's still claiming that he's never seen a ghost before, he's clearly lying. Thank you for watching this recap. If you do not see the next one up in the corner right there on the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up shortly. Please consider following the channel. That'd be cool. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you don't, there's a thumbs down button for a reason.